Hey guys, what's going on? Justin Fuller, ex-Honda salesman, tech lover, and today your host, and we're going to be reviewing the 2024 Honda Prologue, the all-new, all-electric Honda. So if you're thinking, how does this stack up against other makes and models out in the world, and maybe I want to compare this to like a Honda CR-V hybrid, we're going to go over all that and more, so let's hop on in. Things you may be asking is, what is underneath the hood of this thing? So let me pull you on in and we'll talk about that. So you are looking at a single motor system in the EX, right? Your entry-level trim. This is going to be putting out 212 horsepower if you are in the two-wheel drive model, or it's going to be putting out 288 horsepower if you're in the all-wheel drive model, which is what I'm standing in front of today. So I want you to understand that if you are looking at an EX, you're looking at that single motored system versus a dual motor system and you're in one of the higher trims. All right, guys, so while we're up here, there's a couple things that I want to talk to you about. And the first is I want to do a horsepower comparison. So I want you to understand how the horsepower in this vehicle, so for the sake of this, we're going to talk about the two-wheel drive model, right? The 212 horsepower stacks up to other makes and models out in the world. So I'm going to throw something up on the screen. Now, while that's up on the screen, of course, I will remind you, if you go to that all-wheel drive model, you'll get 288 horsepower, which is what this vehicle is today, but I want you to get a feel for that. Now, while that's up on the screen, I want to talk to you about this. Now, there isn't a previous generation to compare this to, so I want to do a different comparison today. I want to talk to you about it. Hey, this is an all-electric model, but maybe you're thinking, do I go all-electric or maybe I go for something that's a hybrid, right? Maybe I want to stay in that Honda family and get like a CR-V hybrid. So if you're looking at a CR-V hybrid, you'd be looking at 204 horsepower versus the 212 in the two-wheel drive or the 288 that is going to be coming out of that all-wheel drive trim. All right, guys, so I want to get you an opportunity to check out the front fascia of this car. It's actually a pretty clean look. It's very minimalistic, which I'm a big fan of. So just kind of simple, long, basic panels, which I think really gives this car kind of a cool looking profile look to it. But while we're at the front of this car, I want to talk to you about 0 to 60 times. This vehicle goes 0 to 60 in less than 4 seconds. So we're talking like 3.9 seconds. That is moving quickly. In the all-electric world and a lot of high torque, we'll see how that stacks up. So I'm going to throw something up on the screen so you can see how that stacks up. But while that's up, I'll just remind you, if you were looking at like, let's say a CR-V hybrid, you'd be looking at like 7.6 seconds. So almost double the amount of time to get to that 60 miles per hour. So just something to keep in mind. If you're looking at this thing, it does have quite a bit of torque. All right, guys, so normally I'd stand by the gas tank and we talk about MPGs, but well, that doesn't really apply here. So I want to stand by the charging port and let's talk to you about range, right? So out of the 85 kilowatt battery, you can get 295 miles of range on the two-wheel drive model. Now, if you happen to be an all-wheel drive model like this one, then you'd be looking at 281 miles, right? Now, if you're looking at something like a CR-V hybrid, I want to say it's 590, I think 6 miles of range. So understand there are some gives and takes if you're looking at all electric versus something that's hybrid. So just something to consider. But while we're here, I do want to throw something up on the screen so you can see how does this car stack up against other makes and models out in the world. So I'm going to compare the two-wheel drive model, that 295 miles of range, to some other makes and models out there. All right, guys, so we talked about the range of the vehicle, right? But I want to take a second to talk about charging because those two are going to be closely related. So we mentioned that it has an 85 kilowatt battery capacity, right? So we understand that, but I want you to understand a couple of kind of key aspects to know. So if we're going for fast charging, in 10 minutes, what can I get out of that? Well, in the front-wheel drive model or two-wheel drive model, we'll call it, you could approximately get 65 miles of charge. Now, if we're looking at the all-wheel drive model, then you're looking at 63. So roughly the same within a couple miles, but kind of nice to know in 10 minutes, I could roughly get an hour's worth of driving, right? 60, 65 miles. Now, if you're going to charge from 20 to 80%, how long is that typically going to take on this car? And you're looking at 35 minutes. So in 35 minutes, you could be quite a bit charged up and give yourself quite a bit of that range back depending on which model you're in. All right, guys, so before we get any deeper into this, I want to go over something that I regularly have people run into that struggle. And that's understanding, one, what are the trims, and then two, how do they differ, right? So there are 3 trims in this vehicle. There's going to be the EX, which is what I'm sitting in right now, right? And it's offered in a two-wheel or all-wheel drive. And then there's going to be a touring model, which is above that. And then above that, there is going to be an elite model, right? So I want you to understand a couple things. If I'm in this EX right now, right? And I'm thinking I might want to jump up to that touring model. I want you to understand two things. One, how much extra money is that going to cost me? But two, what is that list of items that I'm going to gain, right? What are the amenities that I'm gaining by spending that extra money? So I'm going to throw that up on the screen. Now, while that's up on the screen, we understand it's a little bit of a cost difference, but I also want to do that one more jump. Hey, if I'm looking at this EX, right, I'm thinking about spending 48, 50 grand, depending on if I want to all-wheel drive, what I want. But I'm thinking maybe I just, I do it, I drop all the money and buy the Elite, right? So if I do go from EX all the way up to Elite, how much extra money is that going to cost me? And then two, what are all the extra items that I'm going to get by doing so? So I'm going to throw that up on the screen so you can understand how much money is it going to cost you, and then two, what am I getting for my money, right? So after you've taken a look at that, let's hop back in and continue reviewing the car. I know what you're asking. Do I ever feel weird laying on the ground in the middle of a parking lot? And the answer is yeah, pretty much all the time. But while I'm here, I want you to enjoy the beautiful 19-inch wheel that you'll see on this car wrapped in an Alenza Alighten tire. Never heard of it, know nothing about it. But at least you can get an idea for what the wheel looks like and the lug system and whatnot. But while I'm down here, I want to talk to you about ground clearance. This car's got 7.9 inches of ground clearance in it. So I'm gonna throw something up on the screen so you can see how does this car stack up against other makes and models. While it's up, I'll remind you, if you're looking at something like a CR-V hybrid, you'd be looking at 7.8 inches of ground clearance. So not much difference, just so you can get an idea and an understanding. All right, guys, so chances are if you're looking at an SUV and maybe something all electric, something like cargo space is gonna be important. But while we're back here, I just wanna point out and kind of show you what the back looks like. I really like what they've done back here as far as the look to it. Once again, straight long panels. I like all the text and the fonts they've used. It's a little bit different look for Honda, but I like it. But let's pop this open and talk about space. So when you pop this open, you've got 25.3 cubic feet of cargo space in back. Now, when I popped this open for the first time, I immediately was like, oh, this reminds me of a Honda Cross Tour. Now, if you don't know what a Cross Tour is, that's okay. They didn't sell that many of them, but it is similar as far as the cargo space in the back. So you've got carpeted floor mats that come standard inside of the vehicle. You've of course got some tie downs in different spots here for tethers and anchors when it comes to things like your car seats. Now underneath you do have some additional storage, so you can pop this sucker open and then you can get to it where you can store additional things, and you've got this nice deep cubby hole down here. You know what I wish they would have done is made a drain hole down here so that you could use this much like the Honda Ridgeline, and that would have been badass. But nonetheless, I like that you've got some additional space that you can work with back here. Now you will notice that you don't have a spare tire back here, so no big surprise there. When it comes to electric, when it comes to hybrids, you typically don't find those things in the vehicle. All right, guys, so with the seats folded up, I mentioned that you have 25.3 cubic feet of cargo space in the back of this car. So I want to throw comparisons so you can see how does this car stack up against other makes and models out in the world. While that's up, I'll remind you, if you were looking at maybe a CR-V hybrid as an option, right, you'd be looking at 39.3 cubic feet. So understand this says 25.3, you could be at 39.3 if you were in a CR-V hybrid, so about 14 more cubic feet. So while this car looks wider from the outside, the cargo space doesn't necessarily reflect that inside. So guys, when you flip the seats completely down, the first thing I want to point out is it's relatively flat, right? You have a good section here, and then it does kind of start to prop up here. So when I sleep in this car, not comfortably as a 6-foot guy, you'd have to sleep diagonal and it wouldn't be great, right? You'd probably need to put something in here to kind of level it out. So if you're ever planning to camp and you're gonna use this car, it might take a little bit of work, but it is doable. I will say that. Now, while we're back here, you've got 57.3 cubic feet of cargo space with the seats folded down. So I want to throw something up so you can see how does this car stack up against other makes and models out in the world. While that's up, I remind you, if you were looking at something like a CR-V as another alternative, because if you wanted to stay in the Honda family, you'd be looking at 76.5 cubic feet. So once again, a considerable amount more space if you're in a CR-V, but maybe that's not the car for you, maybe this is. All right, guys, so let's talk about the rear seats inside of this vehicle. So the first thing I want to point out is, of course, it's a cloth interior here. And in this particular one, you can see that it's kind of this two-tone gray look. It's interesting. It's not ugly, but it ain't great. You know, I'll just say that. It doesn't really resemble Honda. It kind of, I would think maybe this is more of the Chevy Blazer base that this car lives off of. If you're not familiar with that, you can do a little bit of background history on the car. It's actually sitting on the platform that is the Chevy Blazer EV. So just something to be aware, and you kind of notice that when you look at small things, and I'll kind of point some more out as we go. But this is one of those things where it doesn't really look like Honda, but of course Honda's never made this vehicle, so maybe this is the new look, right? But while we're back here, I want to talk to you about leg space. So getting into the back of this car, you've got 39.4 cubic feet, or excuse me, 39.4 inches of leg space in the back of this car. It's quite a bit. So I was sitting up there earlier and I had this pushback a good amount. I've got a good amount of space to work with. So when it comes to leg space and how much space you have here, it is quite spacious in the back. Now, as far as amenities in the back though, there's just not much back here. I do have air vents. That is extremely important. I live in Texas. I'm profusely sweating all the time. But back here, other than that, you've got some storage here, then 2 USB-Cs. So not a lot going on back here, other than the cloth interior with, of course, a flip down and a couple of cup holders. All right, guys, so let's talk about the front row of this vehicle. So once again, you can see that it has that two-tone gray interior look going on. It's even on the dash, actually, which I'll show you here in just a minute. So they continue the theme. Once again, it's a little bit odd, but it kind of works. You know, it is what it is. But I want to talk to you, of course, about seats, and then I want to talk to you about leg space. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is leg space. So in this car, you have got 41.4 inches of leg space. So if I push this sucker all the way back and take it all the way down, it just keeps on going. The amount of leg space is obnoxious. I could easily be, I don't know, 6'7" and fit in this car quite fine. To give you an idea, 41.4 inches in this car. If you were in a CRV, 41.3 inches. So understand quite a bit of leg space inside of this car. But I want to throw something up on the screen so you can see how does this car stack up against other makes and models out there in the world when it comes to front row leg space. So go ahead and take a look at that. And then once again, like I reminded you, if you were looking at a CRV, it's almost identical. So I'm surprised. Most every car that Honda has is 41.3 inches of leg space. I don't know where they got it, but they squeaked out 0.1 inches more of leg space in this particular model. So let's talk about the dash layout and kind of what you're seeing. So once again, that gray two-tone theme continues as we come across the doors and across the dash. Now, when you get over here, you've got an 11.3 inch screen here. And then behind here on your cluster, you've got another 11 inch screen. So two different full digital screens as far as, you know, how you're driving. And then of course, all of your audio and anything else setting wise that you want to take advantage of. So the dash is a very clean, very minimalistic, nice setup, but they have kept important buttons. And I just want to point those out real quick. First, your AC controls are buttons, meaning you don't have to get in the car and wait for a screen to load up to be able to turn on the AC or to use it. That is extremely nice. Honda made a mistake years ago, and I've seen other cars do it as well. The other thing, you do have a volume knob. People are weird about this. They want to be able to just crank on it left and right and have volume versus use a button somewhere or a touchscreen. Understand that you have that as well. And then when you come across here, it's minimalistic buttons. It's very similar to what Honda's offered in the past, just a little bit different presentation, but kind of minimalistic, but easy to use and understand. Where things get weird though, your shifter. This is one of those things that must be the Chevy Blazer carryover is, you know, if I want to move out of it, I've got to go up and go down to get into drive, or pull straight back to go into neutral, or up to go into reverse. It's just it's not typical to Hondas. This feels very old fashioned. This feels like something I would find in my grandma's car some years ago. So kind of interesting when it goes to the shifters. And then when you come to the other side here on your windshield wipers, very similar. You have these stalks with like these deals on the back that you've got to turn and use, and then they go up and down. It's just it feels like something out of an old Buick, right? And I think that may come over from the previous platform of where the Chevy Blazer lives. So let's talk about the steering wheel controls and the cluster behind it. So when it comes to the left side of the steering wheel, over here is where you're gonna have that adaptive cruise control. The presentation is just a little bit different. It seems to be on and running kind of permanently from what I can tell. If you want to suggest how much gap space it's going to include, right, you would do it here. So just different presentation as far as what's it doing, but I like it. It's actually kind of clean. Hey, this is, you know, less boxes means less space. It'll keep between me and the car in front of me. So I get up to my speed, I set my cruise control, it'll appear up here. And then from there, I can, you know, cancel, resume, do all the normal things that I would do. So easy enough, but just a little bit different than what I'm used to. Now on the back side of this, you can jump from track to track, and then you do have one paddle shifter for, I'm assuming, regenerative braking. Now over on the right side, this button right here is gonna be key. So when right now you can see I've got audio, I've got MPGs, and then I've got weather and time. When I jump to this, it can jump over to maps, which is really cool, right? So a nice big display there, and I could have it here, so I could have it two different places. And then I like that you can turn it to like dark mode. That is such a cool feature because it's just so much more easy to view with that contrast for me. So I love that that's an option that you can do. Now, while you're here, of course, you can jump between your audio, and then you'd be able to scroll up and down to select, right? So I'm gonna leave it on Android Auto. And then you've got your voice command, and you do have Google Assistant in this car, so you can ask Google to do anything that you want. Google, what time is it? So just kind of nice that you can do that, right? And Google will tell you. And then on the back of this, you've got your volume control. So as I shift, you can see it changing here, but then I've got a volume here. So volume controls are not far apart, which is a little bit odd, but at least they exist in two different places. So very clean display up here. So let's talk about the center stack real quick. It's actually pretty big, right? It's wide. I mentioned this car is very wide, but you've still got space in here, and you're able to have a wide setup, which I really like because I like the way they've done it. It's a nice big place to set my phone, set my keys, have a couple things sitting here, and they're not like falling everywhere and going everywhere, right? I've got two cup holders. I've got this weird phone storage charging potential setup. It'll tell you not to put keys in there, obviously, if you want to be able to charge. Then when I open this, I've got a nice deep well that I can work with. So a very wide setup. And then down underneath, you can see I have some additional storage under here if I want to throw stuff down there. So if you really want to load your car up with crap, you can, right? And then of course up here, I've got 2 USB-Cs and then one standard, cigarette lighter, what I'd call it, power outlet. All right, guys, so let's talk about the 11.3-inch touchscreen that lives inside of this car, right? So very clean, nice setup. You can see I have Android Auto running right now. But if I wanted to jump to like my home button, easy enough to do when I get here. This is going to resemble most every other Honda in the world as far as what this screen looks like, right? Vehicle status, I can jump in here. It'll present me with a couple things. It's kind of cool. It'll show me tire pressure monitoring. I can jump off of it. Tire pressure here. I can kind of jump around. So I like what they've done there as far as all four. And then I can jump into the energy efficiency. So they've made this very clean and easy to understand. So when it comes to the info, the presentation, I really like it. It's not hard to get through and work through. Very simple and easy to understand. Now, Google Assistant, obviously, that lives in the car. Really cool. It has the Play Store. So it has a Wi-Fi hotspot. Of course, you'll have to sign in when you get the car. This is in demo mode right now, so I'm not going to pull it up and download anything, but kind of cool. And of course, it's going to be the Android Auto apps that'll work in your car. If you want to get anything outside of that, there's different ways you can do it. If you've seen some of my other videos, you already know about that. Charging wise, you can jump in here and then it'll present you where you currently live, what your range is, that sort of thing, so you can plan accordingly. So nice and clean. I mean, it's nothing that's like wild and graphics and anything like that, but it's very easy to read and understand, which I do like. I mean, it could be a little bit, nicer presentation, but I think what they're doing is clean and understandable, which I'm okay with that, right? Android Auto, if I jump back to that, it'll of course take me back to the screen, which we already kind of know and how to use. Nice and big, looks really good. So jumping back over there, setting wise, I can jump in here and get through all my normal things. If you want to connect up a phone, vehicle settings, notifications, apps, all my basic stuff, right? My equalizer, kind of a lot of the basic stuff that you might be playing with. Ambient lighting, that's going to be some of the different lighting that lives inside of the car. If you want to get in here and play around with that, you can. You can turn it on and then kind of do some different stuff. You might have it turned off if you're trying to save charge. Climate controls, you can control it from the touchscreen. However, you don't have to, which I really, really like, because as I mentioned, previous Hondas, they did it in the Civic and the Accord for a while, where like you had to wait for the screen to load up. So you got to control the AC and it was obnoxious. I live in Texas. The summers are hot. You don't want to mess with that. Now coming across Wi-Fi hotspot, of course, it comes with a preemptive one, and then you'd want to set that up and get it put into your name. Audio wise, of course, you can jump in here, do all the different things. Of course, they are pulling in Google, right, as an Android base to this car. So now you're going to see Google News and some podcasts and a few different things that you may not have seen in the past. So kind of cool. Some additions there when it comes to that. And then lastly, phone, which we already talked about. Maps, we already know about. You can download offline maps, which is kind of cool to have in the car. So that way, if you find yourself somewhere where you don't necessarily have service, you can still take advantage of maps. Pretty cool. Honda Link plus OnStar. So you're going to see OnStar in this car. Once again, I think that plays a role with that Chevy platform, right? That Blazer platform. OnStar magically lives in this car now. But Honda Link is something that's been around for a while. It offers, a couple different features in case you get an a car wreck and the airbags deploy. They can call 911. They can, let them know the year, make, model, VIN, that sort of thing, and where the last known location of the vehicle was. But it also offers a few other features. So I'll throw some down on the screen. It used to be at HondaLink.com, but I think they've changed it since then. Some different things like being able to start the car from your phone, being able to control the door locks, and just different settings and different options and things you can take advantage of, but they are subscription based. Now, control-wise, you can jump into here. This is where you can control some other things. So some interesting things in here, and you can see a very simple setup, right? Not a lot going on here. It's like what should be in all this empty space. But if you jump over to more controls, drive and park is where I found myself. So when I got in this car and started driving it, I thought the emergency brake was on, because when I let off the gas, it almost came to a screeching halt, and that's because it was in one pedal driving, which I'm assuming is using regenerative braking to build back up. But what I found was, it feels like you're driving with the emergency brake on, but you can turn that feature off to where when you let off the gas, it'll just roll. So just know there's some different settings in here that you can play with. Door and window stuff, if you want to control window lockouts and stuff like that. Universal remotes, right? Setting up your garage clicker to work inside of the vehicle, so you don't have to have the clicker in the car. So some basic stuff, just so you can understand the touchscreen and kind of what the layout is. Very easy to understand, very easy to work through. I didn't have any issues with this. I was able to take advantage and kind of work through without knowing anything about it, and make my way through it the first time. All right, guys, so I'm going to take this thing for a quick ride just so I can give you some kind of ideas for what it feels like, right? So the first thing that I will mention when I started driving the car was that I had the 1-foot pedal driving mode on. I had to immediately turn that off, because when you let off the brake, it comes to almost a screeching halt. I'll actually show you kind of what that looks like. So here, let me go to more options and we'll jump into it. So I'm going to go to normal. So I'm going to accelerate here, right? So we're going. I let off the brake and the car comes to a complete stop almost, right? So now we're at a stop. I didn't even touch the brake. I just let off the gas. That's all that happened. When you're driving in that mode, it's kind of awkward. It feels like you're driving with the emergency brake on. So just understand you can change that. It's under the one pedal driving option under drive and park. So you can make that change to allow the car to be able to roll a little bit more, and then it drives a little bit more like what you're used to. Now, as far as riding the car, comfort goes, and then of course, road noise, it's an exceptionally quiet car. One, you don't have the hum of the engine while you're driving, right? So when I'm driving in this, I hear that light, high-pitched noise that you get off when you're driving in an all-electric car, right? If you've ever heard one back up, you get that sound, but very quiet. So I'm gonna pull out and get up to speed here, just so we can see kind of what this works for. So as far as getting up to speed, oh man, it's got torque. Like, it goes. Like, I just got up to 50 very quickly, and it didn't make a sound. It's so awkward because you don't hear that engine rev. You don't get that thing. So it's just different when you're in an all-electric vehicle. Something to understand, one, it drives differently, and two, it's got an incredible amount of torque. Now, with that torque, it's a very quiet ride. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn around here in just a second here, and I'll take it back up to speed one more time, just so you can hear. So a Mustang just drove by. He's making lots of noise, but when we gas it, we're up to 40, we're up to 50. Super quiet ride, and I mean, I don't hear anything. I can barely hear the wind outside, and that's, I mean, I have to really focus to hear it. So a very quiet ride. I'll give them that. If you're gonna get this car and you're gonna spend 48, 58, $1,000, it is a quiet ride. I'm not catching a lot of road noise. I'm not hearing wind noise. I'm not even, I'm not hearing the car itself. I'm not hearing rattling. You don't hear plastic moving or anything like that. It's a very solid build and solid feeling ride. So when it comes to ride quality and sound, this is nice. Now, if you've never driven an all-electric vehicle, I would highly encourage you to go drive one and get a feel for it. It is different. It doesn't drive like a normal car. You're not gonna feel it shift gears, and when it takes off, you're gonna feel that torque, and it's just gonna keep building and building and building. It's actually a lot of fun. I really do enjoy it. So in that instance, I would highly encourage you to. I mean, the idea of having an all-electric vehicle is very appealing to me. However, I do live in Texas where, 296 miles of range doesn't necessarily always get you where you need to be, so you will have to stop and charge. But knowing that this works and uses the Tesla charging stations, and I can plan accordingly, and you can plan out routes and things like that, I don't foresee it being an issue. But related just a quick drive to give you an idea for what it sounds like, what it feels like, and the torque that the car has, fantastic across the board. All right, guys, so if you happen to miss one of the comparisons as we were going through the whole video, you had to scrub through or you had to walk your pet fish or whatever the case may be, now's the time to pay attention. So let's go through everything again. All right, so starting at the front of this car, you've got 212 horsepower coming out of a single motor system in the EX, or a dual motor system if you're in that Touring or Elite. Now, that's putting out 212 horsepower or 288 horsepower if you're in the all-wheel drive trims, right? But I want you to understand, how does this car stack up against other makes and models out there in the world? So while that's up, I'll just remind you, hey, if you were looking at something like a Honda CR-V hybrid, you'd be looking at 204 horsepower. So just something to give you a comparison or understanding for. If you're thinking all electric, maybe hybrid, not sure, but I want to live in a Honda, that would give you some comparison. Now, let's talk about range, because we can't talk about MPGs. So when it comes to range on this vehicle, if you're looking at the two-wheel drive model, you're looking at 295 miles of range. Now, if you go to that all-wheel drive model, you're looking at roughly 281 miles, so the difference of about 14 miles. But I want to throw a comparison up so you can see, how does the range in this vehicle stack up against other makes and models out there in the world when we're talking about specifically the 85 kilowatt battery capacity this vehicle has. Now, while that's up, I'll just remind you, hey, if you were jumping into a CR-V, your range is like 590 miles, and that's something that you get when you have a gasoline engine and you've got that hybrid setup to work with. So just some give and takes to remind yourself about when you're thinking about this. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is 0 to 60 times. This car has got some torque. I took it around the block quickly just to get a feel for it, and it has go juice. This car goes from 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds. So I'm gonna throw something up on the screen so you can see, how does this car stack up against other makes and models out there in the world. While it's up, remind you, if you were looking at like a CR-V hybrid, it's almost not even close. The CR-V hybrid gets 7.6 seconds to get from 0 to 60. This is like 3.9, and let's be honest, I feel like it probably go faster than that. It just keeps pulling and pulling and pulling. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is ground clearance. So on this particular vehicle, you've got 7.9 inches of ground clearance. So I'm going to throw something up on the screen so you can see how the ground clearance in this vehicle stacks up to other makes and models out there in the world, because maybe that matters depending on how you're going to drive this vehicle, where you're going to own it, and what kind of topography you live around. While that's up on the screen, I'll remind you, if you're looking at something like a CR-V hybrid, it has 7.8 inches of ground clearance. So this one is 0.1 inches, a little bit better than the CR-V. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is front row leg space. So in the front of this car, you have got so much leg space. When I push the seat all the way back, It was obnoxious how much extra space that I had in the vehicle, 41.4 inches of leg space. So I'm gonna throw something up on the screen so you can see how does this car stack up against other makes and models out there in the world. While it's up, I remind you, hey, if I were looking at a CR-V hybrid, you'd only be at 41.3 inches of leg space. So understand this car squeaks it out, has a little bit more leg space when it comes to that. Now, when you jump into the second row of this vehicle, you're gonna have 39.4 inches of leg space in this vehicle. It was plenty. I feel like they're nice and fun, and it's wide. This car is wide, man. But I want to throw a comparison up so you see how does the 39.4 inches of leg space stack up against other makes and models out there in the world. While it's up, I'll just remind you, hey, at that point, if you jumped into a CR-V hybrid, you would actually be gaining leg space. That one has 41 inches of leg space in the vehicle. Now, after that, I want to talk to you about cargo space, but there's two comparisons we got to talk about. The first is, hey, if I got the seats folded up much like I do now, what's the standard cargo space that I have that lives behind that second row? And that's 25.3 cubic feet. So I'm going to throw something up on the screen so you can see how the 25.3 cubic feet stacks up against other makes and models out in the world. While it's up, I remind you, hey, if you're looking at a CR-V hybrid, thinking, well, how does that stack up? CR-V hybrid has 39.2 cubic feet, so about 14 more cubic feet. So quite a bit more space in a CR-V when it comes to that. But this is very usable. If you just need to throw some bags back there, so throw a couple suitcases, you'd be good to go. It's very usable to take advantage of. Now, the next comparison I want to do is if we take the second row and we fold those seats down, what does that cargo space look like? So in the back of this, when you fold the seats down, you've got 57.7 cubic feet of cargo space in the back end of this car. So I want to throw something up so you can see how this stacks up against other makes and models out in the world. While it's up, I should remind you, it's not 100% flat. It's kind of got a little bit of an angle. If you wanted to camp in this car, maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know if that's going to be the type of person that owns this car, but if you did, you might have to adjust or kind of level it out. You can make it work, but as a 6-footer, you'd have to sleep diagonal, and then it wouldn't be as easy as I would like, is what I'll say. But if you were in the CR-V hybrid, you'd have 76.5 cubic feet, which is considerably more. But the CR-V hybrid has this weird hump thing in it, so you'd have to go back a couple of generations or flatten that out too. So camping in these cars is probably not the best idea. All right, so the next thing I want to talk to you about is one of the hardest things I found when I was selling Hondas that people will just really struggle to figure out, and that's understanding the difference between the trim levels. So this car has 3 different trim levels. There is an EX, which is what we're in the base model, right? Then there's a Touring, and then there's an Elite. So what I want you to understand is if I'm in this EX and I'm thinking about jumping up to the Touring, how much extra money is that going to cost me? And what is that list of items I'm going to get? So I'm going to throw that up on the screen so you can see. And then after you've taken a look at that, I want to talk about jumping up 2 trim levels. So if I go to this EX all the way up to that Elite, all the way up to the top trim, how much extra money is that going to cost me? And then 2, what is that list of items I'm going to get by spending all of the extra dollars? So if I go from base model to top end, what's it going to cost me? What do I get? So hope all of these comparisons help you out. I highly encourage you to come out, check one of these out, and drive it. It is a cool car. It's a very clean setup. It is different. It does have a lot of things that resemble, you know, maybe a Chevy Blazer. Key shape's kind of different. The shifters are a little bit different. Just some of the different things, the materials in the car, the platform. If you open up the door, some of the screws that hold the license plate on happen to be the one. You know, I was talking to a couple of sales guys. There's just a handful of things that are right? That aren't quite Honda. But I don't know that that's the end of the world, right? They're not really game changers. They're just different. And that's okay because this car is different. It's a first generation, right? We're going to see how it goes. But as far as the car goes itself, such a clean look, 2 big clean screens in front of me, a nice big wide space to use, a good center console, nice front row leg space, second row leg space is good, cargo space is adequate for what you would probably need. The range, roughly 300 miles, I can work with that. It's a pretty cool car, man. You know, as far as an all-electric, I think it's a really good start for Honda. Would I like to see them, you know, kind of take this and blossom upon it? Absolutely, I would. I hope that they'll take this and kind of go all electric and go hybrid. But I think this is a really good starting place. And as a first gen, I think this is an awesome car. So I want to ask you for a couple favors. 1, I hope you'll press the like button because you like the way I present the content. 2, I hope you'll leave a comment if you have questions, comments, concerns. You want to know about something, you have a question about a feature, I hope that you'll leave a comment. 3, I hope you'll subscribe to the channel so when I produce content like this, you will get it. And then 4, I hope you'll share the video, man. If you like it, you like the way I present the content, you got some friends that are maybe shopping all electrics or looking for a new Honda, I hope you'll share this with them. So like, comment, subscribe, all the things. Later, guys!